I don't know what you think you could do here, Stephen.
John, good to see you. I see the wife still picks your ties.
What has this kid been telling you?
How far has it gone?
The president's about ready to order a counterstrike. That's what we're recommending you do.
It's a bluff, John. Call it off.
No, it's not a bluff. It's real.
Hello, General Barringer. Stephen Falken.
Mr. Falken, you picked a hell of a day for a visit.
General, what you see on these screens up here is a fantasy, a computer-enhanced hallucination. Those blips are not real missiles. They're phantoms.
Jack, there's nothing to indicate a simulation at all. Everything's working perfectly.
But does it make any sense?
Does what make any sense?
That.
Look, I don't have time for a conversation right now.
General, are you prepared to destroy the enemy?
You betcha.
Do you think they know that?
I believe we've made that clear enough.
Then don't. Tell the president to ride out the attack.
Sir, they need a decision.
General, do you really believe that the enemy would attack without provocation, using so many missiles, bombers, and subs, so that we would have no choice but to totally annihilate them?
1 minute and 30 seconds to impact.
General, you are listening to a machine. Do the world a favor and don't act like one.
1 minute and 20 seconds to impact.
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Hensarling, and you're listening to Watch This List. I've been wanting to cover war games for quite some time, and it finally occurred to me this morning what I love so much about it. This movie has resonated with me since I was a kid. And I never really understood the pull. It's a fun movie. It's a thrilling movie. It's well shot, well edited. I love the score. I love the drama and the kind of absurd intensity of the ending. But deeper than that, I think it comes down to how fantasy can appear as reality so convincingly. And in the case of Joshua, it's a fantasy until it isn't. When Falken storms into the room and he says, "General, you're listening to a machine, do the world a favor and don't act like one." And then he says that this is a computer-enhanced hallucination, that everything they're seeing on the boards isn't real. Behringer reacts and tells everyone to step down, and then there's no missiles, there's no problem. But after that, Joshua sort of takes the reins and decides that he's going to launch the missiles himself, and it becomes real. And this is something that is so common that I feel, where we get an idea in our head, and if it's one that we like or one that's interesting, it grows. It doesn't just stay. There's no stasis for a thought or a desire. And then it may be that it's only in your head, and you may even have no intention of acting upon it or actualizing it. And then there's no consequences yet until there is a possibility that comes up that you can do something, and then it can be dangerous. So there's there's these layers of where I can see Joshua is almost a metaphor for addiction in a way. Because the only winning move is not to play. The only drink I can't have is the first one. And in the end, with the tic-tac-toe game, that's also such a rich metaphor for this, of having an obsession or a problem and then playing against yourself and realizing that where you situate the X is where you're going to situate the O, and you can't beat it. It's a losing combination of moves. So when Matthew Broderick says, learn, Joshua, learn, and makes him play himself, and then he goes through all these counterattacks and all these different possibilities, and every single outcome is win or none, win or none, win or none, over and over. That's what that is. That's how it feels to be out of control, to be unmanageable, to be at the mercy of something that's driving you. And with alcoholism and sobriety, what happens is that the drinking stops, and then other things begin to try to take its place, because there's a deficit there, there's a hunger there, there's a habit that wants to move. And in step 6, which is what I connected WARGAMES to today in my mind, and knew that that was what I was going to talk about. They're called character defects, whether it's gossip or greed or lying. Maybe they don't seem as fatal as the primary addiction does, but they sort of creep in, and they have the same futility, as Falken says, of tic-tac-toe. Like, I do this, this happens. I do this, this happens. I do this, this happens. Stalemate. But there's this temptation to convince myself that if I play the game differently, or with someone else, or what have you, like so many addicts will say, if I just had this job, if I just moved to this place, if I just got rid of these friends, if I just did X, O differently, my obsession would change. And step 6 is all about realizing, no, the only winning move is not to play. WARGAMES came out in 1983, directed by John Badham, who had done Saturday Night Fever. It was an homage to Lumet's Failsafe back in 1964, which was a Cold War thriller about the fears of nuclear terror. WARGAMES is also fun because it's about amateur hacking, which was just starting to happen then, like the juvenile dropout who's actually a genius and interested in computers. Badham was the son of a U.S. Army general and had a master's from Yale. Worked on a lot of TV prior to making films. This was Matthew Broderick's first film, pre-Ferris, and Ali Sheedy, pre-Breakfast Club. And it's budget was around 12 million and it grossed 124. So this was a big movie, nominated for 3 Academy Awards: Best Cinematography, Best Sound, and Best Original Screenplay, which Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks had been working on since 1979. I think that's one thing I really love about it, is that Ebert had a line where he described it as he didn't know that if it was accurate towards computers or what they can actually do, but the movie makes you feel that it is, and that's really what matters. Ebert also deemed it one of the best films of the year and gave it 4 out of 4. It's also kind of a superhero movie in a way. Rewatching it this afternoon, I was thinking it could really be Lightman's origin story, where he gets the girl, saves the world, does what he's good at doing. My buddy Rob wrote in his review that he doesn't just save the world, he saves it from boomers. Which I think Dabney Coleman's sort of the quintessential embodiment of that time frame, boomer. And then John Spencer and Michael Madsden at the beginning too, talking about their hippie girlfriends. But it's an adolescent power fantasy, right? And I have always loved the mix of the youthful spirit, curiosity. Lightman, the way Broderick plays him is he's nerdy, but he is confident, which is unusual. He's not like the brain in Breakfast Club where he's introverted and insecure. He is introverted, but he's charming and charismatic, and you really believe that he knows what he's doing and that he's resourceful and can get himself out of a fix. But at the beginning, when it starts, it's not really a kid's movie. It starts with Spencer and Madsen trying to figure out if their instructions are foolproof. And they don't know that they are in a simulation. They think that it's real. And Madsen almost is like threatening to kill him. That's not the correct procedure, Captain, because he doesn't want to turn the key. He doesn't want to launch the missiles because he panics. And that's how it starts, where it's basically asking us to ponder what the real fear is. Is the real fear that we as human beings can't launch the missiles, or is the fear that what we think is real is a fantasy? Which, again, the goal of step 6 in recovery is that we are entirely ready to have God remove all defects of character. Everything that comes after the alcoholism being gone, that being, out of you, is in the knowledge that what will be left is the truth. The real truth about ourselves, which is what an awakening is. Where we know that we're in reality, where the fantasy is gone or revealed. An awareness that things are different than I think. It's completely against the logic of, this time I'll just have 2 beers. This time I'll stop for 5 days. This time I'll just eat this and not this. Like, how many times do we do that? Like Joshua's round of global thermonuclear war, we create this thought process of our own making, and then we fear its projections. We fear what it says about us or what it says about the future. One of the questions I wrote down watching the film today was, what illusions am I still using to ruin my life? And am I unable to differentiate bad information? Just like General Behringer, when he keeps lowering the DEFCON, he doesn't know what information is reliable and what isn't. All he knows is what he sees. And then even from the beginning, he's completely doubtful of computers, and he's all for the people being in charge and not depending strictly on them, but then he's at the mercy of them because there's nothing else. So he sees planes disappear. They call the Soviets, and the Soviets completely deny being against them. And then it's like, why would the Russians want to attack anyway? I think that's another point that resonates with me too, is nobody considers why the Russians would want to attack. Just like it's really difficult for me to question the direction of my compulsions when I feel compelled to do something that doesn't serve me or doesn't usually end well, and I'm in the throes of it. It's hard to describe this, but I know you know what I mean if this has ever happened to you, where you get in a situation and you can't stop yourself, or you feel like you can't stop yourself. Afterwards or before, have you ever stopped and thought, why am I going in this direction? Why does this keep happening? Why do I want this? That's the futility that Falken talks about when they finally find him at the end. It's always a tie. The game is pointless. Humanity is often planning its own destruction. And Matthew Broderick's character's answer to him is, well, you don't care about dying because you're already dead. And that's kind of the trajectory of the film, is raising Falken from the dead, because he himself is also living in a fantasy world of his own making. He has put himself off the grid. He's pretending that he's dead. He doesn't have a phone. He's obsessed with dinosaurs and extinction. And he can't handle the fact that his son and his wife are gone. So what brings him back is that line, I think, that David says, that he's dead inside, and it's time for him to care about something. And the creator, the designer, is the only one who knows the system, knows how it works, and sort of steps in at the 11th hour. In clinging to our vices, we destroy our lives, defying our instinctive desire for self-preservation bent upon self-destruction. We work against our own deepest instinct. What we are asking is to be rid of defects that far exceed their intended purpose. When they drive us blindly, or we demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible or due us, that is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or, if you wish, of our sins. Addiction eventually does take over, gets the launch codes, whether we like it or not. And WARGAMES is kind of a optimistic view of how that could be steered in a better direction, because Joshua is able to play the record through, and he is able to see that with every single scenario, it's winner, none. over and over again. Winner, none. Winner, none. And he tries all of these different options, just like bombing from here, sending it from here, killing this many people. How many are going to be dead? And he is doing that through the process of tic-tac-toe, realizing that it just is a stalemate every single time. And I wonder if I can make that call before I launch. Because there really are no harmless vices. A lie or betraying a friend or pride, the 7 deadly sins, sloth, lust, all of them lead to a lessening of ourselves. What's interesting in the 12 and 12 is that in step 6 it says that we alcoholics in sobriety are people who have become entirely ready to be freed from their obsession with alcohol. They have said, I do not want this at all anymore. Please remove it from me. And then they have taken action to continue to walk in that way. But then when it comes to other things that aren't fatal or necessarily fatal, it's like, it's just that, well, I gave up drinking and I gave up this. I got to keep something where I'm involved. I don't want to completely lose control of my life. And so we compromise. Best illustration for this is a story by C.S. Lewis about a 10-year-old who had a baseball game. And it was the final game of the season. And the coach told all the kids before the night before that they needed to go to bed early, get enough sleep. And so the kid did that. And then he woke up in the middle of the night with a toothache. And all he had to do was to call his mother, who would bring him 2 aspirin. But he didn't call her. He thought the toothache would go away. So he delays about an hour and a half calling his mom, tries to fall asleep, and he can't. And then he ends up, sleeping in and ruining the game and all this stuff. And the question that C.S. Lewis asks is, why didn't he call her right away? He didn't call her right away because he knew she wouldn't stop there. She would bring the aspirin, but then in the morning she'd make an appointment with the dentist. And this kid also knew the dentist. And the dentist would take extra time looking at his other teeth and would sometimes find other problems. And so the moral of the story is that we want aspirin, not perfect teeth. But the only available help from the mother is perfect help. And the only help available from God is perfect help. But we want like 80%. Just leave me that 20%. That's quote unquote me. Where I can feel like I can take the credit and that I'm not entirely separate from who I used to be. So that's the source of the hesitation. But in movies like WARGAMES, where it's black and white, like the entire movie, we know that it's a game, but Joshua doesn't know that it's a game, and he is playing it as though it isn't. And then when that part of it ends, it turns out, oh, he can actually do this. Joshua, what are you doing? So it's much harder to see when it's taken at a personal level, this whole concept. This moment of clarity that comes and we can begin the journey back. It's like the whole goal is to exit delusion. And then I think that when we do, the reason that there's such relief is because there's this fearful world inside our heads that we manufacture. And if it can be recognized and surrendered, it isn't there anymore. The threat's gone. It's gone. For me, what this is I become entirely ready by recognizing that addiction and denial solve zero problems. Henry Cloud has a great quote that says, the worst thing you can do is think that the wrong road will turn into the right one. Looking again at those defects we're still unwilling to give up, we ought to erase the hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we're obliged to say still, this I cannot give up yet. Let us come to grips with our worst character defects and take action towards their removal as quickly as we can. If the trajectory of this movie is learning, I think a good juxtaposition to it with recovery is unlearning. Joshua is a computer that can only do what it's programmed to do, and it will follow its program to illogical conclusions, right? It only does what it knows how to do. And in the case of WARGAMES, this isn't like an AI that gets its own consciousness. It's just that it's programmed to learn. Whereas I think that spirituality is a process of unlearning. It is saying, what am I willing to be rid of? What am I willing to be rid of? You can have pretty good sobriety, just going through the motions and putting forth some effort and going to meetings and listening and feeling comfortable. But there's so much more. There's so much more that's available to us, I think. And we get in these routines and ways of seeing that feels so automatic. Like Foster Wallace used to talk about how, and this is water, we don't feel anymore our environment and our day-to-day. We're not particularly conscious of what we're trying to move towards or have a vision for the future. Good is the enemy of best, as Lincoln once said. Complacency and feeling just good, like I'm doing well, I'm doing fine, I'm hanging in there. That is the enemy of best. And what do we really have to lose by doing something different? By abandoning limited objectives? These characters in this movie completely step outside of their comfort zones, and it doesn't feel like that in the slightest. David and Jennifer are just high school students, like kind of flunking, actually. They're not even good students. They're just high school students making fun of their teacher during class, laughing, getting sent to the principal's office. She's got like a D in home ec, okay? And David tries to change her grade. They're kind of slackers. And David gets arrested by the FBI and then escapes from being in detention there very creatively, and then calls Jennifer in this MacGyver sort of way of getting the phone to work. And then Jennifer shows up, and like, is it a weekday? Where are these people's parents? I don't know, but she shows up, and then they get on a boat, and it's kind of a crazy plot in that way, that they are so brave. But while you're watching it, juxtaposed against all of the adults who are in, a much more dire situation that they are aware of, you feel like these high schoolers aren't even stopping to question whether they're afraid. They're just moving towards what they think is right. And it's like that. I have such a longing for that sensation, to be in the flow, in the zone, where fear falls away. You don't have to go through the fear. You don't have to conquer the fear. It goes away because the direction that you're moving in is one that you have chosen deliberately, and it is not self-defeating. That's the whole point of these steps, is to awaken to the fact that if you have a willingness to think differently, and you see yourself act differently, you see yourself become a person of integrity, a person who doesn't want to gossip, who doesn't want to lie, who doesn't want to not be in reality and unreachable and cause so much pain for other people because of the compulsive behavior. All of a sudden, fear falls away. There is none. They would have done anything to get to NORAD. The kid, pretends that he's on a tour and goes out with the Birmingham bus, and then he comes right back with Jennifer and Falken. They go to Goose Island. They don't even know where it is. He tries to find his address and realizes he doesn't even have a phone and just shows up there, and he's even under a different name. And all the while, David is trusting a computer named Joshua because he researched Falcon's maze and figured out who this guy was. It's not that I'm saying that the movie is far-fetched, although it is. It's that in its far-fetchedness, I think we, the audience, can feel that the conviction is driving everything. Even for McKittrick, they all have specific arcs. He wants the computers to be in charge. He wants to take out the men. Behringer is the rough old Southern guy who smokes a cigar and never lights it, just kind of has it in his mouth, and it's like, no, we need men, real men in there. And then you've got David and Jennifer and Stephen Falken. And our main ensemble are just not realizing that they're on the same side, but they're coming at it in different ways. But the point is that in the end, Falcon's question is to us, can we practice war without destroying ourselves? That's why he says that he invented the computer system and he named it after his son, because he wanted the computer to practice war safely. And his conclusion is no. And that is the conclusion of the steps. You cannot go to war with yourself without destroying yourself. And if that eureka moment can happen, where all of a sudden it's like, it's a simulation. What I have been thinking that this leads to, it doesn't. The only reason that I constructed a story that says that this bad thing is actually good for me is because I don't know how to stop it. It's not because it is true. It's so much easier to just make up all these reasons why some behavior is rewarding, even though there's all evidence to the contrary, because deep down it's like, I have to say this because what do I do? How do I stop? And the answer here is that we become ready to let them go, to give up the things that enslave us with the hope and perhaps faith that what they will be replaced by is good. And what the end of this game is what everyone knows. The only winning move is not to play. The only drink I can't take is the first one.